Chapter 20. What even is the eye of the mind? 3. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Sierra Camaro lasted about 1 minute longer than Eddington, but still didn't manage to injure or wear out Jean. After her was David McChee, but Jin's spar against him ended in a similar way as his 2 previous ones. However, David was somewhat more tenacious than Sierra, and Jean had to exert more strength than before, due to which his opponent ended up with a broken rib. A simple fracture can easily be dealt with by the Runcandle medical team. As long as the injuries aren't fatal, such as amputated limbs or damaged vital organs, the medical team can fully heal the victim in an instant. Ugh, that was enlightening, young master. Thank you for your guidance. Ugh. Jean flinched when he saw David lose consciousness and fall over, all the while keeping a smile on his face and a thumbs up. Just, how many more of these muscle-brained lunatics are there in this crazy clan? Even if Jean was David's superior, no sane person would smile and show gratitude to the man who just destroyed one of their ribs. Moreover, it wasn't a forced statement. David was truly grateful from the bottom of his heart. Jean hid his discomfort and lightly nodded back. Well, come to think of it, I used to behave the same way while learning and training magic under my master before my regression. I shouldn't be judging David right now. Jin's master, who was 2 years younger than him, wasn't your ordinary teacher. They once scorched Jean with lightning for hours on end to teach him lightning magic, and also sent him flying in the air for an entire day to teach him wind magic. And they were laughing the entire time. Each time something like this happened during his training, Jean would be thanking his master with a smile on his face like the current David. The desire to become stronger can sometimes turn humans into muscle-brained maniacs. I really wasn't thinking straight back then, was I? Swoosh, swoosh. Jean lightly swung his wooden sword around, waiting for his next opponent. I am Mesa Milcano, young master. I am aware of your name. You're the second daughter of the Milcano family. It's an honor to have you remember me. I won't be as easy to deal with as the other cadets you faced before me. Today, I will definitely defeat you, young master. I look forward to it. Mesa positioned herself and prepared for battle. She then calmly began circling Jean without showing any openings. No wonder she was the strongest of Garen's beginner-class cadets. She wasn't behaving the same way as when she was mercilessly attacking Bellup. Mesa was looking down on Bellup and attacking without considering the consequences. However, Jean was a completely different opponent compared to Bellup, so she completely changed her attitude and approach to the duel. Mesa Milcano. I remember that in my first life, she passed all the exams and qualifications required to graduate as a cadet, and was quickly deployed to the main house as a guardian knight. I never interacted with her personally, though, so I don't quite remember the details of her life. She was the perfect example of an elite. Even though she hadn't seen through Bellup's true strength, Mesa was still an extremely gifted fighter. Jean had sparred against Mesa a total of 7 times until now. He had lost the first 2 times, and won the remaining 5. And each time, the difference in their skills and strength was getting wider and wider. And through his duels against talented individuals like Mesa, Jean realized how impressive his gift with the sword was, a gift he never got to use and experience to the full extent in his first life due to the bladed illusion curse. I still need to face 6 more opponents after Mesa. But holding back my strength and energy while facing Mesa is a bad idea. I need to defeat her in a direct confrontation in order to plant fear in my next opponent's heads. His spars against Eddington, Sierra and David were merely appetizers. The duels against the real elites of the beginner training class started with Mesa. And for the 14-year-old Jean, defeating them all head-on in succession would be demanding and strenuous. Therefore, Jean was planning on planting a misconception in the other cadets' minds during his duel against Mesa. That they would never be able to win against Jean in a head-on battle. Having a frontal clash, while still looking relaxed and calm the entire time. Those are the two key points I need to keep in mind during this spar. This time, Jean was the first to make a move. His attacks consisted of the most basic of stabs and slashes. Not a single irregular or odd movement was added. Mesa easily parried and avoided his attacks, but as the offensive continued, her thoughts got complicated and heavy. Why is the young master only using such basic attacks? While they were your standard attacks, each move was heavy and sharp. Mesa's hands and wrists were going numb from parrying all of them. However, that wasn't the reason why her mind was boggled. When will he start going all out? He had the opportunity to send my sword flying just now, but he didn't. He's definitely doing this on purpose. But why? While Mesa racked her brain, Jean continued swinging his wooden sword with a composed expression. Even when Mesa twisted her body in order to escape his sequence of basic attacks, he still adhered to the fundamentals. Is he looking down on me? Ugh. Mesa ground her teeth and stomped on the ground in order to stabilize her stance. Fine, allow me to entertain you, young master. Once Mesa fixed her posture and gripped her wooden sword tightly, her worries vanished. She also began using only the most basic of attacks in order to face Jean. Soon, all the fancy techniques and complex movements completely disappeared from their duel. They were each taking turns attacking and defending. It had become an extremely simple fight. A simple battle of brute strength. Mesa was quite confident and proud of her physical strength. She wasn't being conceited, as she had learned the basics of aura manipulation back at the Milkano castle before coming to the Runcandle clan. Bang, SKRT. Boom. Explosive sounds echoed throughout the training ground as the two fighters' wooden swords hit each other. This battle of brute strength had already lasted for over 5 minutes. The other cadets could only watch the duel with wide eyes. Huff, huff. Someone was now out of breath. It was the sound of Mesa panting. I'm being pushed back in terms of physical strength. Even Mesa knew that she couldn't win against Jean in this spar. But she believed that her physical strength surpassed his, if not equal. Mesa couldn't accept that she would get pushed back by someone younger than her. She was still not aware of the gap between ordinary people and people of Runcandle descent, who own blessed bodies. Ha! Mesa suddenly shouted loudly as she swung down her wooden sword. She was attempting to regain full control of her emotions, but it ended up being the cause of her defeat. Jean didn't avoid the strike containing the entirety of Mesa's strength, and received it head-on. Mesa had expected him to step back in order to dodge her attack, so she was planning on swiftly dashing forward to deal the final blow after her swing. But even if Jean received her frontal attack head-on, Mesa had a backup plan. She would let go of her sword at the last moment, grab his sword arm, swing her legs upwards and catch his neck and shoulders in a front triangle choke. In other words, this was Mesa's trump card. Even Garen judged that her plan was reasonable. However, the situation didn't develop the way Mesa had been expecting. Crack. The wooden sword she was swinging downwards with all her strength shattered as Jin's sword hit it in an upward swing. How come? It's not like young Master Jean used aura just now. As Mesa asked herself the question subconsciously, Jin's wooden sword had already reached her neck, waiting a few millimeters away from her skin. Phew. Jean exhaled deeply and fixed his breath. It's my loss, young master. That was a great duel, Mesa Milkano. While he replied calmly, Jin's forehead was drenched in sweat. Mesa then shifted her gaze down to her broken sword. This was neither a trick nor an illusion. Jean hadn't used aura either. So why was her wooden sword the only one that broke? Damn it. As she watched Jean head to one side of the training ground to get a new wooden sword, Mesa finally realized the reason behind this phenomenon. I can't use this one anymore. Every onlooker believed that the duel between Jean and Mesa was one of brute strength with no intricacy or elaborate techniques. However, there was one hidden truth within the battle. While Jean and Mesa were exchanging blows one after another, the boy had aimed for the center of Mesa's blade each time. On the other hand, Mesa's attacks had affected the entire surface of Jin's wooden blade. Jin's resolve to break Mesa's sword, versus Mesa's resolve to face him in a head-on battle. Mesa's wooden sword breaking was by no means a coincidence. She had believed that this was a battle of brute strength, but in reality, it was a battle of accuracy. There wasn't a big difference in their strength and stamina. However, the cause of her loss was the difference in their accuracy and persistence. Is this even humanly possible? Mesa asked herself as she bit her lower lip. A few seconds later, she came to the conclusion that it was indeed possible to achieve such a feat as long as one was more skilled than their opponent and predicted the development of the battle. It would be easy to achieve. However, she had never thought it would be possible to pull it off right here, right now. Despite being in the renowned Runcandle clan's training class, it was still the beginner training class. No one was supposed to be skilled enough to pull this off. So, is this what it means to be a Runcandle? I'll have to devote myself to my training, and next time, I'll definitely. Mesa returned to her seat. Even if one was expecting to lose, actually experiencing the defeat always left a bitter taste in the mouth. Mesa's heart was filled with pain from the defeat, but also gratitude for having learned an important lesson from Jean. Following his duel with Mesa, Jean faced the remaining 6 cadets. However, he was able to win without much difficulty. No one else faced him head-on like Mesa. Therefore, none of them could steal control over the flow of the battle from Jean. When the final opponent fell before Jean, the other cadets all gulped audibly. In their eyes, Jean had easily defeated all the challengers after Mesa. However, it wasn't as easy as it appeared to be. Having faced 10 extremely talented cadets one after another, Jean was somewhat out of breath after his final battle. Great, I still have some energy left. Jean hadn't made an example out of Mesa just to save his energy as much as possible because he feared he couldn't defeat all 10 cadets. Even if he hadn't planted a misconception in the other challengers' minds by breaking Mesa's sword, he could have still defeated them all. Excellent work, young master. With this, you shall be permitted to attend the intermediate training class starting next year. Congratulations. Huff, huff. Thanks, Garen. I'll be in your care until next year. Should we end the morning training session now? It's almost time for lunch. How long until lunchtime? There's about 10 minutes left. Is something the matter? There's one more person I want to face. Garen froze at Jin's words, and stared at the boy's eyes. Doviko, who do you have in mind? Jin slowly turned his gaze to the cadets. In one corner of the group was a boy sitting with a blank expression, scratching his head. Bellup. Bellup Schmitz. All the cadets' gazes turned to Bellup in an instant. Garen's eyes opened wide as the name escaped Jin's mouth. Has the young master seen through Bellup's hidden talent? The person in question was looking around, dumbfounded. He and the other cadets had no idea why Jin had chosen him. Get up. Come on over and fight me. Jin lightly threw a wooden sword towards the startled boy. Why, young master? I'm Bellup Schmitz. Jin suddenly yelled his name, to which Bellup instinctively stood up. You cannot survive within this clan if you continue acting like that. Get over here. I'll knock your sleepy head awake. Chapter 21. What even is the eye of the mind? 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Bellup stood before Jin, squeezing his wooden sword's handle as cold sweat ran down his face. His eyes kept darting around as he wiped his forehead with his sleeve. He hadn't received so much attention ever since becoming a guardian cadet, which explained his restlessness. The other spectating cadets could see Bellup's soul escaping through his mouth already as the stare-down with Jin continued. Everyone couldn't help but think back on the words the Runcandle boy had told the coward. You cannot survive within this clan if you continue acting like that. Why did the young master tell me such things? Is it because I'm too weak? Or because I'm too timid? Such questions went through Bellup's mind. Is young Master Jean trying to humiliate Bellup since he gets on the young master's nerves? Is he warning Bellup that he won't survive in the Runcandle clan because he's such a weakling? Young Master Jean is crueler than I thought. The cadets were all in agreement. Nevertheless, Jin's eyes were fixated on Bellup, and he tightened his grip on the sword. Bellup. Oh. Why? Yes, young master. Snicker, snicker. Some suppressed scornful laughs echoed amongst the spectators. But the cadets who reacted immediately corrected their expressions and attitude, as they feared Garen would chastise them. However, never mind Garen, even Jean didn't give them a glance and kept his eyes on Bellup. I've already lost a lot of stamina from sparring against 10 cadets. Yes, young master. Having barely come to his senses, Bellup answered respectfully. And you are still unscathed? Yes. In spite of that, Jean began walking towards Bellup before continuing his sentence. I am probably stronger than you right now. Excluding Garen, I would most likely win against anyone here in one last duel. Bellup didn't know how to reply to that, so he simply nodded quietly. That is the reason why I want to fight you right now. Young master, I still do not understand what you... Ugh. Thud. Jean instantly reduced the distance between the two. His wooden sword flew towards Bellup's shoulder, but the latter somehow managed to avoid the blow at the last second, despite his panicked footwork. Following that, the attacks continued non-stop, like an endlessly flowing river. Bellup parried and avoided the sword while retreating. Good moves. Thank you very much, ugh. Schwupp. Jean suddenly grabbed a handful of sand on the training ground and scattered it in Bellup's face. As Bellup tried to resist the urge to close and rub his eyes, he tightened his hold on his wooden sword and stood strong. Why? Young master. But Jean didn't answer and darted towards Bellup again, grabbed his shirt, and slammed his shin into his opponent's thigh. As the impact resounded, Bellup let out a deep groan and collapsed to the ground. I didn't call you here to have a spar. As I said, I want to fight you. Jean approached the seated Bellup, who could barely open his irritated eyes and look up to the Runcandle boy. I also said that I would most likely win. That I would most likely win against anyone here in one last duel. That means that I'm not 100% certain about it. Wipe your face. Bellup used his shirt to wipe off the sand on his face and eyes. Does that mean that the opponent you're not certain of winning against is me, young master? Finally, we're on the same page. This isn't a spar, this is a real fight. So it's time you wipe off that incredulous expression and face me seriously. I could have killed you countless times while you were on the ground. Young master. But the only reason I didn't deal the final blow yet is because I'm showing mercy, for you are incapable of comprehending my intentions. Stand up. I won't go easy on you again. His tone was far too dreary for this to be considered a prank of bad taste. Jean turned around and began to widen the space between them once again. Bellup lowered his face and let out a deep sigh, before lifting himself up and wielding his wooden sword. The cadets who were spectating so far began to wonder whether Jean was actually deranged. No matter how foolish and cowardly Bellup was, the young master was going too far, or so thought some of the observers. Some even expected Garen to intervene and stop the bloodbath that was about to begin. Nevertheless, the instructor only stood on the side, carefully watching the scene before his eyes. Seeing his lack of mediation, frustration grew in the cadets' hearts as they became disheartened. Simultaneously, anger sparked in their eyes. The 7-star knight, who also happened to be a swordsmanship instructor of the clan, couldn't stop Jean Runcandle. So what on earth could the lowly cadets even do on their own? Nothing at all. Yet, they couldn't stop anger from forming. Anger and dissatisfaction that the training class's strongest, Jean Runcandle, could allow himself to bully the weakest of the class, Bellop. Where had the dignity and honor of the Runcandles gone? Was the act of throwing sand at a cadet far weaker than oneself also part of the Runcandles' glory? All the spectators' faces twisted in fury and despair as they watched the two extremes face each other. However, the next moment, all their expressions collapsed into shock and astonishment. Beam. Bellop's wooden sword was shining with aura. It was pale and dim, but true aura nonetheless. Even with that little amount of aura, a swordsman's slashing power would increase exponentially and become fatal. Aura. The weakest of the class, the eternal loser. That boy was suddenly wielding aura, so the cadets were shocked and confused. At this rate, one of the two fighters could potentially perish during this duel. Instructor. We must stop them. This is a training class, not a battlefield. Instructor Gar, swordsmanship instructor, Garen Altamiro. Jean turned to Garen and yelled at the top of his lungs. Yes, young master. You must keep what you see today a secret and take it to your grave. You cannot inform any other Runcandle of this incident. I understand. In the meantime, Bellop put out the aura covering his wooden sword. However, his face wasn't dyed in fear anymore. He seemed dispirited yet furious. Is this what you truly wish to happen, young master? So you are able to use aura. In that case, you shouldn't hold back and make the most of it. Jean versus Bellop. The two of them had a short stare down. The cadets who were complaining all shut their mouths and watched the inevitable clash as cold sweat ran down their cheeks. Bellop was the first to make a move. He instantly zoomed across the field and appeared before Jean with surprisingly agile movements. Crash! Jean blocked Bellop's heavy wooden blow. As their swords got tangled, the battle came to a standstill as it became one of strength. The veins on their arms bulged as their muscles contracted, and the wooden swords trembled under the equal pushing forces. If you wanted to duel me, you've made a grave mistake, young master. SRRT. Jin's wooden sword began slipping and cracking as Bellop coated his sword in aura once again. You should have challenged me, before dueling the others. Snap. Jin's sword broke under the pressure. Immediately, time slowed down for Bellop and the other cadets during the short instant when Bellop's shining wooden sword dug into Jin's shoulder. The wooden sword had completely cut through the shoulder and was about to reach Jin's heart. As he saw the blade dig deeper and deeper, Jin caught sight of Bellop's expression twisting into despair. Despair for having gotten on the wrong side of the youngest Runcandle. In addition, despair for cutting down young Master Jean who had taken good care of him for so long. Bellop's innocent eyes were filled with such hopeless thoughts. As if I'd let you. Bang! A sudden heavy blow hit the side of Bellop's sword. The Runcandle hand-to-hand combat technique, deflect strike. It was Jin's strong palm. As the sword flew away, the recoil shook Bellop's body. Having lost his balance and footing, Jean swiftly grabbed him from behind and choked him. Cook. The other cadets didn't realize what had happened in that short moment, omitting a few top-class cadets like Mesa Milcano. The fuck? Are you for real? He's nuts. Mesa couldn't believe what she saw. Although her spar with Jean had astonished her earlier, it couldn't compare to the shock she received from seeing Jin's current superhuman movements. Ugh. Bellop couldn't do anything but struggle for air as he got choked from behind. As the other cadets stood up to stop him, Jean released his arms on his own. As he coughed and gasped for air, Bellop turned around to face Jean with a displeased look. Why did you stop? You said you wouldn't go easy again. Don't stop, young master. You won this fight, have you not? Are you satisfied now? Is it fun messing around with others, huh? Bellop's pent-up anger all burst out. Jean shook his head. It's not. If it's not fun, then why? Having to push you beyond your limits is also unbearable for me. Unbearable and agonizing. What do you even know about me? Why do you torment me like so? I don't know much about you. But there's one thing I know. Being considerate is something you can only afford once you've become an extremely powerful figure. Belop froze. He then recalled the words Jean had told him before the start of the fight. You cannot survive within this clan if you continue acting like that. You've probably realized just now, but you're weaker than me. You're also kinder than me. I like that aspect of you. But you cannot survive in this hellhole by being a bootlicker. As Jean spoke, the other cadets couldn't even utter a sound. In consequence, Belop's weeping and tearful sobs echoed around. Belop. Belop Schmitz. Look at me. Lift your head and look into my eyes. He raised his head and their eyes met. I truly wish from the bottom of my heart that, Jean paused and placed his hand on the boy's shoulder. You gain enough power and strength to protect that good-natured and kind heart of yours, along with the others here. Lastly, I'm sorry. Belop nodded at his words. Actually, it looked more like he was shaking his head. No, never mind. It was a mix of both movements. Thus, Jean couldn't figure out whether it was an affirmation or a denial. The boy with tears running down his face walked towards the other cadets. Suddenly, the servants carrying large pots of crude dishes appeared at the training ground. The atmosphere seems a bit. Should we come back later, Instructor Garen? Young Master Jean. As the servants hesitated on what to do, Belop spoke up. Please go get your serving on your own today, young master. Jean chuckled awkwardly. All right. In fact, I'll bring your portion too today. As lunchtime came to an end, Garen quietly approached Jean before the afternoon training session began. So, you've awakened Belop Schmitz. The boy has outstanding talents, but his heart and mind were a bit weak, so I wasn't sure what to do. I am grateful to you, young master. It must have been a great stimulus for him. Garen. Yes. Don't run your mouth thoughtlessly. Awakened him. His heart and mind. No matter what my intentions were, it must have been a traumatic experience for Belop. Your actions and behavior today were befitting of a runcandle. Please do not worry too much about that. He is but a guardian cadet. He is not worthy of your pity, his soon-to-be master. Jean stared at Garen, before letting out a small sneer. Swordsmanship instructor of the Guardian Cadets, Garen Altamiro. The only field you are allowed to judge and evaluate me in is swordsmanship. Do not overstep your boundaries and keep those impertinent opinions to yourself. Garen felt his stomach drop as Jean stated his point. The Black King mercenaries I met before once described him as a young overlord, and sure enough, he's one terrifying predator. Garen smirked and immediately lowered his head. My sincere apologies, young master. As you have ordered, I shall take today's events to the grave. Chapter 22. What even is the eye of the mind? 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The unique Genesis Knight in the world, Siren Runcandle. After he welcomed his youngest son at the Garden of Swords 4 years ago, he immediately left for the Black Sea again. The question the boy had asked before was still weighing on his mind. Is God Sodoret stronger than father? I can be stronger than a god. The monsters at the Black Sea didn't attack Siren. They didn't even approach the center of the Black Sea where Siren was currently sitting. It was their method of conserving the natural ecosystem. To eat and be eaten. Siren quite liked the simplicity of this system, which was why he came to the Black Sea so often. A few days ago, a knight came looking for him at the Black Sea. The knight in question had fought and killed countless monsters and bathed in their blood in order to see Siren. This is Khan, Patriarch. Siren didn't turn around to face him and simply opened his eyes. He was sitting cross-legged, but his body was levitating above the ground by a hand span. "Speak freely, Khan." Khan approached him while wiping off the blood on his armor. He then gave his report with a stiff face, and Siren waited for Khan to finish speaking with a composed look. However, halfway through the report, the corners of Siren's lips rose to form a grin. "That is all." The floating body slowly began its descent onto the ground. "So, that's what the youngest did." "Indeed, Patriarch." The content of Khan's report was the details of the uproar at the beginner training class caused by Jin's recent actions. Although Garen had said that he wouldn't disclose the details of the incident to other Runcandles, he couldn't keep it a secret from the Runcandle Patriarch. Therefore, he informed Khan, Siren's right-hand man, about the incident. He didn't tell other individuals, however. Garen wasn't afraid of the current Jin, but he did fear the future Jin. Kohaha. Siren suddenly threw his head back and laughed out loud. So those are the principles the youngest believes in. He'll use overwhelming force to dominate others, while also embracing and caring for the weaker humans at times. Khan didn't answer and simply lowered his head. Smirk. A wide grin formed on Siren's face. In recent years, he was laughing so much, far more than he had ever laughed after reaching the demigod realm. Then we'll need to check whether those principles of his hold any value or worth. Yes, Patriarch. Return and tell this to Garen. Before he moves up to the intermediate training class, have the youngest do a. In consequence, Khan had to spend another several days getting out of the Black Sea and fighting monsters in order to relay the command to Garen. January 1795. Jin, now 15 years old, was acknowledged as a 3-star knight and was enjoying the final break of the beginner training class. Every year, cadets receive a 2-week vacation during the first month. It was their one and only break, as the cadets trained every single day the rest of the year. It was more or less a vacation. Most cadets return to their hometowns during this period. Competent cadets train on their own and inspect their equipment, whereas outstanding cadets roam around the Huphester Alliance's smithies and order custom-made swords. Why do they order swords, you ask? The reason is that they're aware of how they're the most likely candidates to advance to the next class. The results and nominees are announced only after the end of the 2-week break, but most of the time, it's quite easy to predict who will advance to the intermediate class. Starting from the intermediate training class, the cadets no longer use wooden swords. They will have to use personal swords tailor-made for them. The excelling cadets of the beginner class, such as Mesa Milcano, all temporarily left the Garden of Swords in order to acquire their weapons. Even though the results weren't revealed yet, these cadets all knew they would definitely be chosen. Jin, my brother. Yes, eldest sister. Needless to say, the top ranker of the beginner class this year was Jin. If Jin were a cadet like Mesa and the others, he would have been roaming around the smithies and forges in Huphester. However, he was a Runcandle. He was the youngest son of the distinguished clan of Swordmasters, which had far too many invaluable and top-notch swords. Therefore, he only had to grab a random sword in the clan's armory. He didn't need a tailor-made weapon. Amongst the thousands of swords sitting in the armory, a couple of them should fit in his hands perfectly at the very least. It was quite troublesome finding a sword that suited you, you know. However, Jin couldn't choose his sword himself. Luna said that she wanted to gift him his sword and spent an entire month going through the armory. In any case, Luna was far better at spotting good swords compared to the current Jin, so he had nothing to lose by accepting her suggestion. I look forward to it, eldest sister. Bang! Luna removed the enormous axe-sword on her back and laid it on the floor. It was a different sword compared to her beloved Crantle. Jin couldn't help but make a confused face. The axe-sword Luna had laid seemed even bigger than himself. On the other hand, Luna's eyes were glittering with impatience. This sword was once called the Bale's Slaughterer. It's the weapon I enjoyed using back in my teens. What is an axe? Sword, you ask? Just as its name implies, it's a sword with an axe blade attached to the tip. It's massive, heavy and bulky. The history of axe. Swords is, not very long. It's a weapon that Luna Runcandle personally invented at the age of 15. Until then, no one had used a weapon like this. In other words, the name, Bale's Slaughterer, originated from Luna's own, chaotic, wild, and unstable period of adolescence. So, do you like it? Luna spoke with innocent eyes full of hopes and expectations. Chills ran up Jin's spine as he coughed awkwardly. I don't quite think this one is suitable. Luna's joyful and hopeful mood immediately crashed down on her. She wore a sullen smile as a glum atmosphere formed around her. I was just joking. Just joking. It didn't seem like a joke, though. Jin barely stopped himself from saying that out loud, and just chuckled awkwardly. For a few more seconds, Luna held on to the pipe dream that Jin would take the axe. Sword. However, she soon gave up and sighed deeply before taking out another sword. It can't be helped. What about this one, then? The sword Luna showed next was inside a neat, black scabbard without a single ornament or decoration. It appeared ordinary, but when Jin received the sword from Luna, his eyes began to tremble. Since you chose Barasada during the selection ritual, it's only fitting that you get this blade. It also suits your swordsmanship style. SHRRT. As he grabbed the handle and pulled, a snow-white blade entered his sight. Bradamanti. Jin admired the pure, undyed sword as he shouted the weapon's name in his mind. He gazed at the multicolored reflection that shone like a stellar diamond, as if he had fallen head over heels for it. Bradamanti. It is the brother of Barasada, the blade once used by the first patriarch Timar Runcandle. Excluding Barasada, there were very few swords that outperformed Bradamanti in the Runcandle armory. Before forging Barasada, the legendary blacksmith Pekan Minche created Bradamanti as a prototype, which is now known as one of the finest swords around the world. You seem to like it. Of course, eldest sister. It's one of the greatest weapons even amongst the swords we have in the clan. Thank you very much. Jin's tone was composed, but he was so happy he wanted to jump around in joy right now. If it weren't for Luna, it would have been practically impossible for me to take Bradamanti from the armory. The clan wouldn't have allowed it. Still, to think she'd give me Bradamanti. It's the sword Murakan told me to obtain in the future. Since Bradamanti was an excellent sword, many of Jin's siblings were aiming for it. But there was a reason why this sword was special to Jin. Spiritual energy. When Barasada and Bradamanti absorb spiritual energy, they reveal their true worth. But this was a feature only accessible by those who control shadows. Even though many of our siblings yearn for Bradamanti. How can I ever repay you for this, eldest sister? Repay? It seems you're still uncomfortable when around me. How saddening. That's not what I meant, sister. In order to soothe my sorrow, I'll have to bully you. Close your eyes right now, brother. Let's begin our lesson. Yes, Luna grinned mischievously as she rubbed Jin's head and messed up his hair. Today again, I will be telling you to observe using the eye of the mind. I am aware. But unlike before, I will tell you something else you need to know about the eye of the mind. What is it, sister? Luna crouched down and held Jin's hands. Know that within our family, where siblings are busy trampling over each other, there is at least one person who loves you unconditionally without expecting something in return. So don't sadden your sister any more than this. I'm sorry, sister. Before you were born, I was spending my days in loneliness inside this family. But one victim is more than enough. There is no need for you to go through that too. Jin decided not to question Luna's goodwill and love from here on out. It was true that this kind-hearted sister had turned a blind eye to Jin and his misery in his first life. But Jean was willing to turn the page and forget her past disregard towards him. I don't even know everything about her from that life. Maybe she was going through difficult times. I shouldn't judge with incomplete information. It's too soon. What? Your control over spiritual energy is still imperfect in order to awaken Bradamanti. You need to reach at least 3-star spiritual release in order to attempt awakening the sword. 3-star. I think I'll reach that soon enough. I should be able to use the sword soon. Thump. Murakin closed the erotic magazine in his hands with force and stared at Jean. Listen carefully, kid. Barisada and Bradamanti. Those two spirit swords are dangerous weapons that mustn't be awakened carelessly. 3-star is the bare minimum requirement. But use Bradamanti as an ordinary sword until you reach 5-star, understood? But I don't have a lot of patience. I guess I'll have to reach 5-star within the next year. Yeah, right. Even if you're the best spirit controller in his teens and you eat spiritual energy every meal instead of real food, that's still impossible. Enough with the nonsense. Even a street dog would stop on its path to laugh at you right now. How immature. Jean couldn't believe the individual in front of him was really a dragon who has existed for over 3,000 years. Jean frowned visibly and snatched away the magazine in Murakin's hands. What was that? Huh? Something about a street dog. Say that again, I didn't hear you. Give my magazine back. Give it back, you brat. Do you know how hard it was to, young master? The bickering duo paused and turned to Gilly, who was running towards them. She seemed to be in a hurry. What's the matter, Gilly? Instructor Garen is asking for you, young master. Why would Garen want to see me during the break? If he has something to say, tell him to come find me personally. That's, as her eyes shook in worry, Gilly approached Jean and spoke quietly. He says he needs to give a rundown of the operation to you using the map, young master. Operation. Yes, Instructor Garen has assigned you your first mission. And apparently, you'll need to depart as soon as the break ends. Jean put down the magazine in his hand. A mission. True, now that I'm a 3-star knight, it's about time I was given my first assignment. But leaving as soon as the break ends. Something was fishy. Missions were given starting from the intermediate training class. As missions usually concerned assassination, combat, monster subjugation, etc., the beginner class wasn't involved with them. Moreover, the advancement to the intermediate class happened 1 month after the break for Runcandle cadets, so it was odd to be assigned a mission right after the break. Well, I guess I could technically be considered a member of the intermediate class since my advancement was confirmed a few months ago. Maybe they judged that it wouldn't matter to give me an assignment. Once Jean sorted out his thoughts and nodded, Gilly gave him additional information. And the participants of this mission are 10 members of the beginner training class including you, young master. Something is amiss. You should quickly go talk to Instructor Garen. Chapter 23. Jean, the Cadets, the Beastman, N. 1. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There were already 3 cadets inside Garen's office. They were standing stiffly and nervously from the sudden summons. Garen was explaining the mission while looking at the map on the wall. Due to the excellent results of this year's beginner class, this mission was specially assigned to. Ah, you've arrived, young master. With Jin's arrival, Garen wore a faint smile and bowed. While the beginner class normally doesn't receive missions, this case wasn't the first time it had happened. If the beginner class's cadets showed outstanding performance and results, they were issued missions on rare occasions. The current batch of beginner class cadets could only show so much growth worthy of being sent on a mission due to Jin's influence. During Jean and Bellup's duel last year, the latter wasn't the only individual to be awakened. While it wasn't Jin's intention or plan, the battle from that fateful day had greatly impacted the other spectating cadets. We were given a mission, Garen. Yes, young master. This mission involves 10 beginner-class cadets including you. Jean turned his attention to the world map behind Garen. The red symbol must be the mission's destination. That location is, someplace near the Zhan Kingdom. The Zhan Kingdom was in proximity to the land of the beast men. In fact, it was adjacent to the headquarters of the most dangerous race, the White Wolf tribe. Travelers avoid that area, adventurers flock to it, and mercenaries detest it. I've also contacted the cadets who have temporarily left the Garden of Swords. There are 10 participants including you, young master. You will have to carry out the mission in 2 different groups. You'll divide the 10 participants of the beginner class into 2 groups. Indeed. You will be the leader of Group 1, young master. Group 2 will be led by Scott Limon. Scott Limon. While the results hadn't been announced yet, everyone predicted that Mesa or Scott would be the runner-up cadet of the beginner class, behind Jean. Even so, Scott is only at the level of a 2-star knight. If it's a mission near the Zhan Kingdom, it's highly probable that it'll involve beastmen. Something was off. Even if they were Runcandle cadets, they were merely rookies between the age of 14 to 16. They weren't the appropriate participants to carry out a mission dealing with beastmen. Did one of my siblings bribe Garen to assign us on a difficult mission? No. Seeing Garen's confident face, I'm pretty sure father personally instructed him to do so. But why would Siren do that? Jean calmly thought to himself. I highly doubt it simply because I'm connected to Soderette or because of my high scores. In that case, the incident with Bellup was probably relayed to father. I see. I'm starting to see the full picture now. Jean calmly nodded. Then one group must be composed of 5 members. Who will I be working with? Yes. Group 1 is composed of Bellup, Phils, Eddington, Sierra and you, young master. Scott's group is composed of Mesa, Kiko, Taimont and Jushin. Having heard the formation of the groups, Jean immediately saw through Siren's intentions. The 4 cadets of his group were all middle to low. Ranked within the beginner class, with the exception of Bellup. Having awakened with the duel against Jean, Bellup was now part of the mid-upper ranks. On the other hand, Scott's team was composed of top-ranked cadets. There was only one explanation behind this uneven formation of groups. Father wants to test me. He wants to check if my principles of leading those weaker than me won't change during this mission. In that case, this mission was certain to be troublesome. As Jin's intuition told him so, he spoke up again. Give me a rundown of the mission and operation. The mission is to scout the vicinity of the Zhan Kingdom's southern border. It seems a certain tycoon's son went missing in that area. The groups will be in charge of separate areas, and as soon as you find the missing person or clues, you must report back to me. The cadets in the office all calmed down when they learned that the mission was simply a search and report task. And after having reported, if the victim's survival is confirmed, we will dispatch Guardian Knights in order to perform a rescue operation. In the meantime, Groups 1 and 2 will return to base. But if the victim is reported dead, the mission will come to an end as long as there aren't additional requests from the client. Sounds simple enough. Yes. However, you must move with prudence as the chances of encountering beastmen are high. I assume so. And since the Zhan Kingdom's southern border is where the White Wolf tribe is most active, we'll have to be extra careful. The White Wolf tribe. Just as their name implies, they are a race of beastmen who look like wolves with white fur. They're famous for being the most talented and skilled amongst beastmen in combat. Young master, if you encounter White Wolf beastmen during the mission, you are to abandon the mission and retreat immediately. That goes for everyone else too. I also know that. No matter how outstanding this year's batch of cadets are, we're no match to the White Wolf warriors. No need to worry. Garen smiled at his words. I am not concerned. I've personally witnessed how much this year's cadets have grown, including you, young master. However, one never knows what kinds of unpredictable dangers are lurking around oneself. Jean stared straight back at Garen and also smirked. You talk as if a dangerous incident will definitely occur during the mission, Garen. You've caught me. Personally, I can't wait to witness your marvelous figure as you overcome the situation, young master. You're a good teacher. Inform me when the cadets who aren't at the garden have all returned. Understood. 3 days later, the cadets' break ended. Without further ado, the beginner class's mission began. Jean and 9 other cadets went to the transfer gate in order to depart to the Jean Kingdom. It's an honor to be able to carry out our very first mission with you, young master. Group 2 will do our best not to inconvenience you. Scott approached Jean and spoke as they waited for the transfer gate to open. Are you putting pressure on me, Scott Limon? That's absolutely not the case. I am simply showing my gratitude towards the young master for giving us the opportunity to carry out our first mission while still in the beginner class. I'm just kidding. Scott was extremely loyal towards the Run Candles, and his admiration and respect towards Jean were immense as well. However, Scott wasn't the only one to hold Jean in high esteem. Hey, Group 1. Make sure you don't get in young Master Jin's way, and assist him to the best of your abilities. As Mesa sharply declared, the cadets of Group 1 all nodded in sync. Moreover, if we successfully carry out this mission, you may be given a chance to advance to the intermediate class despite your low scores. Do you understand? We understand, Mesa. We'll do our best. Jean smiled to himself as he watched their interactions. It may seem like Mesa was being rude to them, but she truly hoped from the bottom of her heart that all the members of Group 1 would advance to the next class with her. She behaved like the disciplinarian of the class. It seems she has an aptitude for it, but in truth, she was a big-hearted cadet, one who cared most about her comrades. There certainly was something special about this year's batch of beginner class cadets. They all had developed strong bonds centered around Jean. This was a rare case within the competitive system of the Runcandle clan. Moreover, in most cases where strong bonds formed between cadets, they excluded the young masters and ladies from the group. However, during the past few years, Jean had completely made these cadets his subjects. Quiet, everyone. As the transfer gate will soon open, I shall issue a command. Yes. The cadets gathered around Jean in a circle. As soon as we arrive at the southern border, we will set camp at the center of the area. Once everyone's done preparing the campsite, Groups 1 and 2 will go their separate ways and begin surveying the area in earnest. Jean pointed at the map before continuing his speech. The camp's use is for sharing information between us and reporting casualties. Each group will send a member to the campsite in order to share information once a day at a prearranged time. Understood, young master. You shall refer to me as captain and not young master during the mission. And members other than casualties are not to rest at the campsite. However, each group may take breaks at their own discretion. Any questions? None, Captain. That is all. Let us hope that our target is alive and well. A few moments later, the transfer gate activated and everyone's bodies were surrounded by glowing mana. Once the teleportation was completed, the cadets and Jean found themselves at the transfer gate in the central-southern region of the Jean Kingdom. Normally speaking, they would have had to go through all the administrative procedures after arriving, but as soon as the employees saw the robes the cadets were wearing, they skipped all the procedures. The robes had the Runcandle's black sword emblem on it. 3 days have passed since they arrived in the southern region of the Jean Kingdom. The cadets had constructed the campsite and were surveying the area, but to no avail. The Jean Kingdom's southern region was a land composed of grassy plains and forests. They were thoroughly searching through the open, grassy fields, but finding traces of a single missing human wasn't a simple task. It seems we'll have to focus our search inside the forest. There isn't a single clue in the grasslands. Captain Eddington says he saw watertail beastmen earlier. Watertail beastmen. If they're here, it's unlikely we'll encounter white wolf beastmen. Watertail tribe beastmen are a docile and gentle tribe that catch fish in rivers or seas using their harpoon-shaped tails. They aren't found in areas where white wolf beastmen or red tiger beastmen reside. Watertail beastmen always avoid predators when building their villages. The one who'll return to camp and meet Group 2 today is Bellop, right? That is correct. Bellop, depart for the campsite 2 hours earlier than usual today. You'll be slowed down by the sleet. And once you're done exchanging info, go to Area 13 instead of here. We'll be surveying that zone. Understood, Captain. Groups 1 and 2 were meeting up at 9 p.m. every evening at the camp in order to exchange information. Once Bellop left the group, the other members also began moving towards Area 13. Area 13 was a woodland that hadn't been surveyed yet. Something's off. Even though Father personally gave us this mission, nothing has happened so far. Was I mistaken thinking that he was trying to test me? No incidents happened at Area 13 either, and they couldn't find any clues about the missing person. The only special incident that occurred was that they were gifted roasted fish from the Watertail tribe village they found by coincidence. Missing human. We not know. Watertail tribe, nice. You all, miserable look. Fish, take. Gift. Yeah. I know. Thanks. They're well cooked. We'll repay you next time we come over. Having searched the area well past midnight, the members of Group 1 were now waiting for Bellop to return in the rain as they wiped their wet swords. As the sleet continued, they found it meaningless to continue the search in the darkness in this weather. Since we didn't find anything even after surveying Area 13, we'll have to approach the Beastman's territory in order to continue the mission. However, surveying the Beastman's territory wasn't a mission a beginner-class cadet could do. There's no need to do such an unreasonable thing just to obtain good results. It's foolish to go so far. We should spend the remaining 3 days checking the surveyed areas again, before ending the mission. Bellop finally returned from the camp as the watches neared 2 a.m. Young Master Jean. He was in such a hurry that he had completely forgotten about calling him captain. The cadets on standby stood up and rushed to Bellop as well. What's the matter, Bellop? Group 2 was attacked. Even Kiko, who was sent to the camp by them, had minor injuries. Everyone, prepare to move. Was it beastmen? The cadets immediately stood in line, ready to start running at any moment. No, they say it was humans. Group 2 cannot use their flares as they have gone into hiding, so we must hurry to them. Chapter 24. Jean, the cadets, the Beastman, N. 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Their numbers. They've confirmed 3 individuals. There's no way a mere 3 idiots would attack Runcandle cadets. There are definitely more of them somewhere. Eddington, David. Once we get near the campsite, search for the assailants. Yes. If you find them, do not engage. Report back to me as fast as possible. Jean hadn't expected the cadets to be attacked by humans instead of beastmen. If they still attacked us despite our Runcandle robes. Are they radical Zipful followers? As they urgently ran, Jean continued to listen to Bellop's report. The assailants were all wearing masks, so Group 2 couldn't identify them. But they did mention that the attackers were using the most widespread and common long swords in the Zhan Kingdom. In that case, it was likely this was the work of insiders from the Zhan Kingdom. But he still couldn't put aside the possibility that Zipful followers were behind this attack. It was possible that they had purposefully used weapons manufactured in Zhan in order to confuse us. If Group 2 managed to escape after the battle, the enemies mustn't be 5-star knights or higher. The problem is that we don't know who they are, why had they attacked Group 2? If they were indeed radical Zipful followers, and if they had come here after hearing that Runcandle cadets were carrying out a mission in this area, then they would have targeted Group 1 first, as Jean was part of it. After running non-stop for 3 hours, the campsite was finally in sight. They would have arrived faster if they had traveled through the grasslands instead of the woodlands, but they couldn't afford to get discovered by the enemies. Eddington and David separated from the group in order to search for the attackers. The only ones remaining near the camp were Jean, Bellop and Sierra. 5 a.m. If they headed towards Group 2's hiding place now, dawn would arrive. Since they still didn't know the number of enemies and their forces, the cadets and Jean would be at a disadvantage if light returned. I hope Group 2 hid themselves properly. They're all skilled kids, so I shouldn't have to worry too much. The remaining 3 members of Group 1 began to move again. They planned on joining Group 2 at their hideout and waiting for Eddington and David to return with details on the assailants. Jean and the others swiftly arrived at the hideout, but Group 2 was no longer there. All that was left was a letter at the entrance to the cave and puddles of blood on the ground. Why, young master? This, looks like they got found already. Jean clenched and ground his teeth at this sight. These motherfew. I don't know who you are, but I will find you, and I will kill you all. Jean hadn't felt anger in a long time. Even during his sudden death in his first life, he felt more despair than rage. And after his regression, he was busy making the most of his new life every day and had no time to think about his emotions. But this time, his head heated up with rage in an instant. The bloodstains around the cave all came from children in their teens. Moreover, those children were his subordinates who were following him. Jean closed his eyes and composed himself before acting rashly. He had to keep a cool head in order to find the enemies and avenge the cadets. Calm down, Bellop. The blood hasn't fully dried yet. It hasn't been long since they were found. Jean spoke to Bellop, who was gasping heavily. There was so much blood that he thought Group 2 had all been killed. There's a lot of blood, but no pieces of flesh or bones. And there aren't any traces of bodies falling onto the grass. Group 2 managed to escape during the battle. There are many footprints here. But looking at the sizes, it seems there were only a couple of enemies who were searching this area when they were discovered. Sierra calmly nodded to Jin's observations. She was already tracing down Group 2's movements by examining the footprints and bloodstains. They seem to have gone west, young master. And there's a piece of bandage here. Bandage. Jean quickly joined Sierra's side and observed the strip of bandage. It was most definitely manufactured in Huphester. There was one attacker. He must have wounded Group 2 before escaping first. Group 2 seems to have stayed here for a moment in order to tend to their wounds but had to escape as they predicted the attackers would return. Looking west, Jean would see a long path of grass being stepped on. Since there were no traces of horse hoof prints and only human footprints along with bloodstains, there was no reason for Jean to hesitate. Sierra, hide in this area and wait for Eddington and David to return. Then come rejoin us. We'll go after them, Bellop. They were puffing and blowing as they ran at full speed. As none of them had slept a wink and spent the entire night running and searching, their stamina was nearing its limits. Bellop was exhausted just from keeping up with Jean, but the latter wasn't too worried right now. As long as there were 5 or less 4-star warriors to face, Jean could easily deal with them all. In fact, the one thing that concerned him was how he'd use mana and spiritual power without the cadets noticing, but he didn't drown himself in those worries. He cared more about saving the cadets than keeping his secret hidden. Metallic sounds. The cadets are fighting people. Jean and Bellop's rushed pursuit was fruitful. After around 30 minutes of chase, they could hear noises in the distance. Bellop also noticed the sounds. They both stopped on their tracks to find the source. Jean stopped his breath and scanned his surroundings, checking if any enemies had followed them as well. We will move undercover from now on, Bellup. But Group 2 is fighting the enemies right now, young master. We're in a forest right now. Instead of announcing our arrival to everyone, it's better to sneak behind the attackers and strike them in surprise. If there aren't many enemies, we can end this within a few seconds. As the two covertly traveled between the trees and approached the source of the noises, they could finally check on the cadets of Group 2. They were in the middle of combat in the center of the forest. None of them had received fatal wounds such as amputations, but everyone had minor injuries such as small cuts around their bodies. Scott, Kiko, Jushin. Where's Mesa? He could only see 3 cadets. T/NPR/N, #Justice for Taemont. The masked enemies numbered 2. Seeing their movements, Jean came to the conclusion that they were indeed 4-star warriors. We'll strike them from behind simultaneously at my signal. I'll take the left, you take the right. Wait, no. Do you have a dagger with you? Bellup took out a dagger stored in his chest strap. Close your eyes. Why was Jean telling him to close his eyes in a situation like this? Bellup wasn't the type of person to ask himself such questions. If the young master ordered him to close his eyes, he would close his eyes. Once Bellup did so, Jean covered the dagger in spiritual energy. Spiritual power could enhance the cutting and destructive power of a weapon like aura. However, it had one more effect. When a weapon is covered in spiritual energy, the object's existence and presence thins out. Therefore, it could greatly increase the chances of success of a surprise attack, especially if one accurately threw the dagger without making a sound. Listen carefully, Bellup. As soon as I'm done talking, wait for 2 more seconds and go attack the enemy on the left. Swoosh. As soon as he finished whispering, Jean threw the darkened dagger. The blade cut the wind as it zoomed across the forest, and lodged itself in the back of the rightmost enemy's head. Ugh! The attacker that was swinging his sword around immediately stopped moving. But before his ally on the left could even turn his head to check on him, Bellup ran up to him from behind and swung his sword down the surviving enemy's back. The assailant quickly noticed the attack and turned around to parry Bellup's sword, but had his Achilles tendon cut by Jin's follow-up surprise attack. Arg! Thud! Thump! Jean didn't reap the attacker's life immediately, and strike the back of his head and his temple with the pommel of his sword. And as the enemy fell to the ground half-unconscious, Jean pressed his knee onto his nape and completely suppressed him. Young master. The Group 2 cadets ran up to Jean. Their faces were painted with relief and hope for their survival, but was soon followed by the despair of having ruined the young master's very first mission. Is everyone all right? Do you know who sent this bastard? Jean slammed his fist down on the attacker's calf as he kept groaning and wheezing. He also put more strength in his knee to dunk the assailant's head in the mud. We're okay. But Mesa was captured by them. We have failed you, young master. Sigh. Jean exhaled deeply and grabbed the surviving assailant by the hair and removed his mask. It was the face of a 30-something-year-old man he had never seen before. The ones who failed are him and his boss. You guys take care of your injuries for now. Scott seems to have been wounded the most. Spare me, you want me to spare you? Jean couldn't help but let out a sarcastic chuckle at the assailant's words. Doesn't seem to be a Zipful follower since he cares for his life. Spare me aren't the first words a bold and reckless person would say after daring to attack Runcandle cadets. You should have said that before attacking my subordinates. You have 2 choices right now. Either you tell us your affiliation and why you attacked us along with where your headquarters are, and we'll kill you, and only you, painlessly. Smack, smack. Jean spoke as he slapped the assailant's cheeks from side to side. Or you keep your mouth shut, and the Runcandle clan will kill anyone and everyone related to you in the most painful manner that exists. Choose wisely. The attacker's eyes trembled as he listened to Jin's cold voice. You don't have a lot of time to think. Make a choice already. Will you really kill only me if I talk? I know that, the revenge of the Runcandles, is never this merciful, that's usually the case. But I am someone who keeps my promises. My name is Jean Runcandle. If you talk, your family and friends won't be put in harm's way. I put my honor and the clan's honor on the line. The attacker turned his gaze to observe the cadets. They simply stood quietly and nodded. I will talk. A wise choice. I am from a revolutionary group called Kinzalo. Kinzalo. As soon as he heard the name, Jean remembered an incident which created an uproar and shook the Zhan kingdom in his first life. It was the large-scale terror attack committed by the self-proclaimed revolutionary group Kinzalo. Kinzalo was different compared to the radical followers of the Zipfel clan. The Zipfel followers only targeted the Runcandles and performing terror attacks, but Kinzalo's area of activity was all around the world. They were crazy lunatics who believed that their king had to become the king of the world in order for their revolution to be complete. Kinzalo had ties with the Beastmen and caused so much chaos. They became famous for assassinating the king of Zhan and massacring so many civilians. However, Jean didn't know what happened to Kinzalo afterwards. He only knew that they were still active and thriving around the time he died. A revolutionary group. I see now. You planned on attacking Runcandle cadets, causing disorder in the Zhan kingdom, right? I'm only a low-ranked member, so I don't know that much. I also don't know the location of our headquarters, but the branch I was part of is located at the entrance of the Beastmen's territory. There are around 20 members in that branch. I see. I'll ask one last question. Why did you capture Mesa? The attacker shook his head and sighed. For propaganda. Apparently, the superiors ordered us to capture the female cadets alive if possible in order to use them for propaganda and publicity for the revolution. What a foul story. SCCRT. Jean pulled Bradamanti out of its scabbard, and the attacker closed his eyes. Thud. With this, I have kept my promise. A head fell to the ground, and Jean swung his sword one last time to remove the blood on his blade. The situation is dire. We don't have time to ask for reinforcements from the clan. I'll have to go on my own. Chapter 25. Jean, the Cadets, the Beastman, N. 3. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Jean couldn't have predicted that they were dealing with the terrorist group from his past life, a group he had only heard about from rumors. Moreover, they weren't satisfied with just attacking the Runcandle cadets. They also planned on kidnapping the girls. How long has it been since Mesa was captured? It hasn't been an hour yet. Then they must still be on their way to the Beastman's territory's entrance. Jean approached the dead body with the dagger in the head and pulled it out. He then received 2 more daggers from the cadets and stored them in his boots and inside his robe. We will also prepare to pursue them, young master. No, I'll go rescue Mesa on my own. You stay here and finish treating your wounds. Once you're done, reunite with Group 1 and request for assistance from the clan. Yes. The cadets all showed surprised expressions. The attackers we faced were all about 4-star warriors. How could we send you alone when there are 20 of them? You mustn't, young master. Please take us with you. Rescuing Mesa is important, but your safety is our utmost priority, young master. In fact, it's far too dangerous for you to pursue them. Let's return and ask for reinforcements from the clan together. The cadets all raised their voices in disapproval. According to the now dead assailant, there were a total of 20 members in their branch. The cadets were right. Chasing them to rescue Mesa was foolhardy. Especially if he were to go alone. And he might have been lying when he said there were 20 of them. If we all die, including you, young master, the promise you made with him would be voided. Please make a careful judgment. Mesa is a comrade we all care about, but deaths happen regularly on missions. And if we immediately ask for reinforcements from the clan, she could be safely rescued, Scott. Yes, young master. As you say, deaths happen regularly on missions. But how can a legitimate Runcandle child sit by and not do anything when a cadet was captured? Jean calmly looked around, making eye contact with each cadet. I am stronger than you all think I am. So stand up straight and follow my orders. Any other objections will be considered insubordination. The cadets all erased their distressed expressions. They couldn't say anything else due to Jin's powerful tone and gaze. I await with impatience for all of you to grow stronger so that we can fight side by side in the future. I will get going now. Oh, and Bellup. Yes. Since everyone from Group 2 has been wounded, you are the strongest person after me now. Do you understand? You mustn't hesitate anymore. I shall bear that in mind. Now that all was said, Jean sprinted away as time was of the utmost importance. All the cadets bowed in his direction until he was out of view. Currently, Jean has reached 3-star spiritual release, 3-star swordsmanship and 4-star mana. Nobody would believe it if someone said these were the abilities and strengths of a 15-year-old boy. However, it was still reckless to face 24-star warriors simultaneously with these abilities. Furthermore, if the low-ranked lackeys were 4-star warriors, it was likely that the superiors were 5-star or stronger. However, Jean was confident enough to go face them all alone, as the enemies weren't aware of his spiritual power and magic. Moreover, although his swordsmanship was 3-star only, he had gained the knowledge of the secret tomes of countless martial clans. His chances of winning were not that low. I won't have to fight against 20 opponents at the same time. They've all scattered around, looking for the cadets, so I just need to deal with one small group at a time while searching for Mesa. Jean judged that there was enough distance between him and the cadets as he came to a halt. As he calmed his breath, Jean created a ball of mana on his right palm. He planned on using mana to search for the enemies. Seismic Sense. Seismic Sense was a 3-star earth magic spell. As its name implies, it is a spell that senses the state of the ground, and is often used to detect earthquakes or other natural disasters. In other words, it wasn't the appropriate spell to use to track down enemies. However, depending on its application and links, magic has an infinite amount of possibilities and usages. Be that as it may, ordinary magicians require cooperation with another when trying to make use of the application and link tricks. Whoosh! As the ball of mana on Jin's right hand gradually permeated the ground, Jean created a second ball of mana on his left hand. This one was partially transparent as it was of the wind attribute. Multicasting. This was a skill that most magicians around the world could only dream of mastering. Without an aptitude for it, even 7-star magicians are unable to use this crucial skill. Jean could use multicasting since his past life, as soon as he became his magic teacher's pupil. Wind Pursuit. As he finished casting the second spell, wind began to gather around the transparent mana. After the wind blew around Jean for a few seconds, it detected the slight reaction from Seismic Sense and began flowing in that direction. The wind was following the information given to it by Seismic Sense. I'm lucky they're moving in the grasslands. If they were in the woods, it would have been hard to track them even with these two spells. If the members of Kinzalo had gone through the forest, the trees and lifeforms in there would have disturbed the detection, making it nigh impossible to find them. Jean cancelled his magic. Multicasting consumed an extreme amount of mana, and if there was a magician amongst the enemies, they could find out that they were being pursued. They haven't gone very far. After running for around an hour, Jean could finally see physical traces of the terrorists around him, such as footprints or flattened grass. As he was about to start running again, Jean flinched and immediately stopped all movements. When he checked the footprints again, the number of pairs had gone down. The-ish. An arrow came flying at him through the high grass. Jean effortlessly avoided it and aimed his sword in the direction it had come from. There was a ditch. The attackers had expected the cadets to follow them, and had dug a hole in advance. As I thought, a Runcandle cadet. Your movements are good. I can see why Chaff had such a hard time earlier. The kid dodged the arrow. Clark. Give me a gold coin. 3 men wearing masks came out of the burrow and giggled amongst themselves. It seemed they had made a bet when they saw Jean. Whether he would be able to avoid the surprise attack or not. The man they called Clark took out a gold coin and tossed it. You made money thanks to that fucking brat. Good for you. The winner of the bet caught the coin and smirked as he took out his sword. Jean was still silently observing his opponents. They were composed of 1 magician and 2 warriors. Their aura and mana aren't that strong. They must all be around the 4-star stage. While Jean carefully judged his enemy's strengths, the people in question thought the boy was frozen in fear. Don't worry too much, kid. I don't have a habit of torturing people to death on purpose. We'll end this ASAP. But why is he alone? Where are all the other brats? They must have all been killed by Chaff and Greg, Kekek. About this Chaff and Greg, does one have a scar on his left cheek and is the other bald? When Jean spoke up for the first time, 2 of the men burst out in laughter. Wahaha, scar on his cheek, bald. It's gonna be hilarious when we tell them about this, ha ha ha. However, one of them wasn't laughing. The magician. How do you know about Chaff and Greg's appearances? Isn't it obvious? I took off their masks to check after killing them. They were fighting against my subordinates, you know. The glee in their eyes immediately disappeared. Jean was still holding his sword casually with an indifferent expression. Stop bluffing. Those 2 are 4-star knights. They're not people some Runcandle beginner class cadets can defeat. Do you guys actually call assholes who gang up on kids, knights, in Kinsalo? Your group seems vastly different compared to the Runcandle clan. Clark, Mills. Check our surroundings. It seems there weren't just children on this mission. This brat isn't a cadet. There must be a guardian knight somewhere. The men didn't seem to think that Jean could have killed Chaff and Greg. Even if he was a pure-blooded Runcandle, they couldn't imagine that a child who had yet to fully develop had killed 2 4-star knights. Thus, the 3 of them immediately steeled themselves. Death could arrive at any moment for them. Before joining Kinsalo, they were either mercenaries or knights. And during those days, they had heard plenty about the strength of Runcandle guardian knights. Ha ha ha. Jean let out a chuckle. Even though you guys fear the Runcandles, you didn't think twice about attacking our cadets. There are no guardian knights here. I came alone. Bullshit. If I had a guardian knight with me, you guys wouldn't have been able to chat leisurely like this. And if I had one with me, where could they be hiding in these plains? Also, there's no way our knights would need to hide in front of 3 baboons like you. The nervous men controlled their breaths as they observed their surroundings. Jin's words weren't wrong. There was nowhere to hide in this open area. And so, the men returned to their threatening and arrogant attitude. They were embarrassed and felt humiliated for being afraid of a kid like Jean, a brat who seemed 20 years younger than them. You really came alone. I thought you were an arrogant kid who trusted his clan's knights, but you're just an ignorant brat who doesn't know when to fear for his life. You think so? It would have been better for you guys. Before letting Jean finish, Clark dashed to him and swung his sword at the boy's neck. If I were merely an arrogant kid who trusted his clan's knights. Die, ugh. Clark suddenly fell flat on his face with a groan even though he was just about to kill Jean. One of his legs had been cleanly sliced off without warning. Good thing I bought time. The cause of Clark's amputation was a spell called Wind Blade. It was one of the hardest spells to use amongst the 4-star wind magic spells. Jean had secretly prepared the spell while chatting with them. Clark. What kind of runcandle uses magic? The magician began to cast a spell to counterattack while Mills sprinted towards Jean in a fury as he wielded his sword. You bastard. Clang. Jean took a stance as he parried Mills' downward swing. The aura-covered attack felt heavy to Jean due to his immature body. Nevertheless, a single 4-star knight was no problem for him. As Jean pivoted and aimed for Mills' flank with his sword, the magician yelled. Mills, fall back. Whoosh. A huge flame had formed on the magician's palm. He then launched his spell, swinging his arm, and the flame streaked towards the boy like a rope. A 4-star fire spell, Flame Whip. It was the strongest spell the Kinzalo magician could cast right now. Jean didn't avoid the attack and received it with his body. The corner of the magician's lips rose as he saw his spell hit. Jean then used the fact that his body was hidden by the flames to stab Mills in the neck with Bradamanti. SLRRT. With a blade in his neck, Mills couldn't even cry out in pain and fell into death's embrace. The magician stepped back in shock as he couldn't believe his eyes. The final member, Clark, was still on the floor, crying in pain as he held his stump of a leg. Jean grabbed the flame whip clinging to his robe with his hand and extinguished it. Sparks scattered around as the mana in the spell disappeared in the wind like ashes. As he had fully absorbed the Phoenix Heart, all fire spells of 6-star or lower rank couldn't inflict damage on Jean anymore. Blasted. The magician began casting a new spell when he realized Jean had high resistance against fire magic. Icicle Shot. The same spell that had attacked Jin's carriage on his way to the Garden of Swords. Don't approach me. The icicle shot flew towards Jean, but this time, it broke apart and fell to the ground before even reaching him. Beast King Orgul's Pendant. The artifact's mana had protected Jean. Penetrating the pendant's mana with spells of 5-star or lower was going to be difficult for the magician. How? You whack. Bradamanti drew a parabola as it slashed the magician in the waist. When Jean twisted the blade inside the man's body, the trembling magician bit the dust. I have a nice sister, that's how. After finishing off Clark, who was going into shock, Jean began running across the grasslands again. Obviously, he made sure to disguise Clark's injury as a sword cut instead of a magic attack before leaving. Chapter 26. Jean, the Cadets, the Beastman, N. 4. You are listening at novelfull.audio. They weren't lying in ambush for long. The ones who captured Mesa aren't far from here. Jin's entire body was soaking in sweat as he ran across the plains. Since yesterday morning to now, he had been awake for over 24 hours searching for clues and pursuing the enemies. And since he had also engaged them in combat, his stamina was starting to reach its limits. In fact, the use of multicasting and Wind Blade were the decisive factors behind his stamina's depletion. There were still 15 enemies left. In the worst-case scenario, he would have to face them all simultaneously, but if he is lucky, he would face them in small groups of 2 or 3. Having a child's body is such a pain. I'm still too young. If I had my past life's combat abilities, I could have easily decimated those morons from earlier without having to strategize everything. During his chase, Jean realized that the attackers from Kinzalo were all shabby and unskilled. They were all ex-mercenaries or knights, but it bugged Jean how they didn't even bother erasing their tracks while moving. It's probably because they're underestimating us. Jean was on point. Kinzalo was looking down on the Runcandle cadets. While the cadets were part of the Runcandle clan, they were all rookies who had yet to experience a real battlefield in their lives. Kinzalo's lack of caution was also evident in how they only left behind 2 members to finish off Group 2 after they captured Mesa. They had also placed just one magician and 2 warriors in that ditch to deal with potential survivors and pursuers. Keep underestimating us. I'll make sure you regret it later, though. Jin's greatest weapon right now was the fact that they were underestimating him. That was why he wasn't afraid of facing them all in battle despite his low stamina. He ran for another hour. This time, he was keeping an eye out for ambushes, but the footprints remained unchanged. In fact, he could now see the wheel tracks of a carriage in addition. Jin stopped for a moment in order to inspect those tracks. The ones who captured Mesa reunited with another group here. They probably locked her in the carriage. Now that a carriage was involved, it would be much easier for Jin to catch up to them. The ground was uneven due to the sleet from the previous night, so they wouldn't be able to advance quickly. As he followed the wheel tracks for a while, Jin came across an unknown path that continued into a forest. It was a road that led to the beastman's territory. After recollecting himself and his breath, Jin entered the forest. The wheel tracks continued along the unique path into the depth of the trees. Well then, how should I plan it out? Jin was in the middle of the cadet rescue operation. An unexpected situation had arisen during their mission, so his current operation had changed from scouting to rescuing. The search mission for the tycoon's missing son wasn't the priority anymore. In that case, what was the most important aspect of a rescue mission? The answer was obvious. The protection and safety of the target. Killing all my enemies isn't the priority. I need to make sure Mesa doesn't get hurt. Currently, 3 hours have passed since Mesa's kidnapping. 3 hours. Too much time had passed. The dishonorable and immoral kidnappers could have started using Mesa as a plaything during this time span. However, Jin still believed that Mesa was safe. If they were humiliating Mesa, Jin would have caught up to them already. The only information about Kinzalo Jin had was from the newspapers in his past life. They were a criminal armed group of radicals, who followed a strict hierarchy on the inside. That was how Jin viewed Kinzalo. A strict hierarchy. That was the aspect Jin was focusing on. It was highly likely that Kinzalo's members enjoyed their spoils of war in an order of privilege amongst them, and hence Jin believed Mesa was still safe. I should reach their branch headquarters soon if I continue along this path. And it hasn't been long since Mesa and her kidnappers arrived there. About 30 minutes ago. 1 hour. It was probably something between that. The kidnappers were most likely handing Mesa over to their superiors right now. Therefore, this was the last chance he could rescue Mesa safely. Every minute, every second was crucial now. Thus, he had to attack them head-on in order to save time. However, if he did such a frontal assault at their branch headquarters, several problems would arise. If all the surviving members of the group were gathered there, Jin would have to face dozens of enemies on his own. And even if he could kill them all, they would probably use Mesa as a hostage. After thinking for a few seconds, Jin nodded to himself. First, I need to create confusion and chaos amongst them, so that they wouldn't even think of using Mesa. Fortunately, we're inside a forest right now. 2 balls of crimson mana formed on Jin's hands. They were the same spell the enemy magician had used earlier. The 4-star fire spell, Flame Whip. Good thing I reached 4-star in magic before this mission. It would have been difficult to burn down a damp forest with just the firepower of a 3-star magician. Whoosh! Jin swung his 2 flame whips in all 4 directions. The spell has decent firepower, but its real advantage is that once it hits a target, it doesn't get detached so easily from it. In other words, there was no better spell than this to burn down a drenched forest. Jin cast the same spells over and over again. Magical arson was a serious felony in this world. However, such restrictions didn't matter to Jin Runcandle. Once the area was ablaze, Jin then conjured wind mana. Wind Wave. Another 4-star spell. Once he finished casting it, a bluish wind filled with mana began blowing the blaze forward. Just like the name implied, it was a spell that created a huge gust of wind that undulated forward like a wave. The blaze encroached onto the forest. Initially, it was unable to burn the damp trees, but once the flames grew large enough, it began swallowing everything in its path, wet or not. And so, Jean advanced through the forest as he burned it down. He concealed his body behind the flames, taking advantage of his resistance provided by the phoenix heart. His mana had greatly diminished due to blindly casting 4-star spells, but his plan was extremely successful. Now, he could see a building in the distance. It was Kinzelo's branch headquarters. People were exiting the building in panic one by one. Fire. The forest is burning. Report to the captain. And gather the magicians. Water. We need water. Why is there a fire? Kinzelo's members were running around chaotically. As the fire hadn't reached the headquarters yet, they planned on extinguishing it beforehand. I don't know who their leader is, but he's probably not crazy enough to enjoy the spoils of war during a forest fire. Now, he just had to kill them one by one and rescue Mesa. Jean removed the 2 daggers in his boots and covered them in spiritual energy. In the meantime, Kinzelo had no idea someone was aiming for their lives. People usually can't think rationally while in a state of panic during a sudden disaster. If there were a single cool-headed individual amongst them, they would have realized this forest fire was created artificially. However, the warriors were hastily pouring water on the fire, whereas the magicians were busy casting water or ice spells. Jean easily managed to get near them as he was hidden amongst the flames. Swoosh! A shadowy dagger flew and stabbed a magician in the neck. The victim let out a yelp, but it was camouflaged by the sound of crackling branches and the panicked shouts of the others. That's one down. Jean threw the corpse into the blaze and set his eyes on his next prey. An out-of-breath warrior holding buckets of water. He perished the same way as the magician. Detecting the dark blade flying through the flames was difficult for mere 4-star warriors. Jean retrieved one of the daggers he threw. Including the one in his robe, he still had 2 remaining. It would be so satisfying if I killed them all like this, but even these morons would notice something if people keep disappearing like this. Jean lowered himself and observed the situation amongst the enemies. A man who appeared higher ranked than the others seemed to have noticed something. He began leading the others and giving out orders. I should kill him first. As the man yelled something that was inaudible to Jean, the men around him all took out their weapons. They then scattered around the building. He had 2 magicians and warriors stay to put out the fire and had the others stay on alert around the building. Not a bad decision. Well, it would have been a great decision if Jean weren't within the fire. Jean flew towards the commander, who was left alone, like a whistling arrow. He hadn't removed Bradamanti from its scabbard yet on purpose. The metallic sound and Bradamanti's white blade would have ruined his surprise attack. Streak. As Jean suddenly appeared from within the fire, the commander swung his sword around in shock and panic. The boy bent down to avoid the blade, but he couldn't dodge the kick that followed. Bam! As Jean rolled on the ground, the man continued his flurry of attacks. You rat! So you're the one who set the forest on fire. Stab! Slash! The man kept aiming for the boy on the ground, and Jean rolled his body to avoid the attacks without a moment to rest. The man then threw his sword away and jumped onto Jean, seizing him. You fucking brat! I'll definitely kill Y, but Jean had allowed himself to get captured on purpose. He had also initiated this hand fight on purpose by leaving Bradamanti sheathed. Despite the man's entire body weight pushing down on Jin's body, he wriggled around like a flexible snake. Before the man could realize what was happening, Jean had already snapped his neck after deforming his body into an unnatural position. Crack! With the sound of the neck bones snapping, the man flopped onto the ground as saliva dripped out of his mouth. It was my first time using the Meyer-style martial arts. Fuck, it hurts. Jean could only deform his body beyond its limits to kill the man thanks to the Meyer clan's martial arts. He dislocated his own shoulder in mere instants and passed his legs in between their bodies to twist the enemy's neck. It was one of the techniques written in the Meyer clan's secret tomes. The Revenant's assassination. He had killed the man who appeared to be the leader. All he had to do now was deal with the underlings who were mindlessly running around the blaze and the morons who were nervously guarding the building's surroundings. After fixing his shoulder, Jean set his gaze on Kinselo's branch headquarters. The old stone building was slightly smaller than the residence of middle-class nobles. Jean speculated that there weren't many enemies left inside. He also had all the keys. After going through the leader-like man's corpse, Jean found a keyring in some gold coins. He threw the body and the coins into the fire and approached the building's front gate. Kriawak. As he opened the rusty iron door, the first thing he saw were candles. And on the walls were bizarre drawings he couldn't understand the meaning behind. They were Kinselo's symbols. What an unpleasant bunch of people. He stuck to the wall and walked down the corridor. Not long after, Jean realized that he couldn't sense anyone in the area. At the very least, there wasn't anyone on his floor. And after using the keys to open every room he came across, there was a single key left untouched. Is it a key that leads to the basement? As the building structure was fairly simple, Jean quickly found the entrance to the basement. The remaining key fit perfectly inside the keyhole. Once he descended the stairs, he saw Mesa chained to the wall. Mesa. As soon as he saw her, Jean felt relieved. She hadn't experienced anything concerning yet. She was still wearing the cadet's uniform. However, her face was bruised all over from being seemingly beaten. Clang. Clang. Jean imbued aura into Bradamanti and cut the chains tying her against the wall. It's dangerous, young master. Why are you? When he heard the very first word she spoke to him, Jean couldn't help but clench his fist and grind his teeth. This isn't the moment to worry about me, Mesa Milcano. Can you walk? I don't think I can run. I see. For now I'll support you, so let's, boom. The two of them flinched and raised their heads. With that sudden explosive sound, the entire building began trembling. Chapter 27. Jean, the Cadets, the Beastman, N. 5. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Shit, what's going on now? After propping one of Mesa's arms over his shoulders, Jean was about to get up. Boom. Boom. But due to the sudden explosions, they had to stay crouching. The Kinselo branch headquarters shook as if it were about to collapse on itself. An earthquake. Or did someone upstairs accidentally blow up some explosives? Jean stared at the ceiling and sharpened his senses. He had a bad feeling, but kept his composure. Young master, please escape first. Silence, Mesa. Please promise me one thing. Mesa spoke as she stared directly into Jin's eyes. If we're confronted with a life-threatening situation, you must abandon me. You cannot lay down your life here. Jin nodded silently. But that didn't mean he agreed with Mesa. If he actually agreed with her, he wouldn't have come to rescue her on his own in the first place. However, he judged that pretending to agree with her was the best way to calm her down in this situation. We need to figure out what's happening up there first. Could it be magicians attacking the building? It feels like it'll collapse at any moment. The magicians here don't have this much power. The reverberations and explosions continued throughout their conversation. We're going up. Unfortunately, I won't be able to support you. Concentrate and stay right behind me. The two of them sneaked up the stairs. The impacts were happening on the outside, but the walls inside the building already had fissures and cracks all over them. The murals with Kinzalo's symbols were destroyed as pieces fell to the floor. However, oddly enough, despite the critical situation on the inside, not a single member of Kinzalo had entered to check up on the building. They're either still outside trying to figure out what's happening, or they're already dead. Jean exited the headquarters accompanied by Mesa. Once they were outside, he finally understood what was going on. It was the latter. When he opened the iron gates, he was greeted by the corpses of the Kinzalo members. They appeared to have been slashed by large claws, as their bodies were covered in scratches and lacerations. They were killed while trying to return to the building. And this is the work of beast men. They ended up encountering the one group of foes he wanted to see the least. Jean felt a bitter taste in his mouth. The outside was synonymous to hell. The blaze Jean had caused had already reached the building, and the small paths that weren't burning between the flames were covered in corpses in hideous states. Mesa. Yes. It's the beast men. Looking at the corpses, it's a tribe that fights with their claws. Shush, don't say anything. Follow that path and keep walking. I'm sure you can avoid the flames yours, shit. Having stopped midway through his sentence, Jean unsheathed Bradamanti and raised it. Something was slowly walking out of the inferno not too far from them. His fur was far too white to belong to someone who had just stepped out of the fire behind them. A height that exceeded 2 meters and eyes that shone blue. The White Wolf tribe. Their opponent held an enormous hammer in his right hand, and that weapon was the cause of the tremors so far that shook the entire building. With his Herculean strength, a characteristic that belonged to their tribe specializing in combat, he had smashed the hammer around the building the entire time, as if to get some cornered mice to reveal themselves. Ha! I was wondering who subdued these pieces of shit, but it's just a kid. Their opponent stopped on his tracks and began swinging his hammer. Meanwhile, Mesa was struck with fear. Not because of her impending death, but because of the young masters. Young master, it's the White Wolf tribe. I will buy you some time. Please keep your promise. Ha! Jean exhaled deeply. He then turned around and karate chopped Mesa in the back of the neck. Her trembling body flopped as she fell unconscious before she could say anything else. The beastman shrugged and grinned as if they found the situation amusing. Geez, what a tearful scene. Such a shame I'm the only one here to see it. Is this, that thing you humans talk about? That thing, right. Love. Are you two lovers? He spoke like some crude, backstreet gangster, but the White Wolf tribe couldn't be compared to such weaklings. When compared to a knight, White Wolf beastmen were at least 6 star. And that was for your average adult beastman. In other words, they were a race born and raised solely for combat. Therefore, if Jean faced him in battle right now, his chances of survival were close to 0. I am Jean Runcandle, legitimate son of Siren Runcandle. Reveal your name, beastman. Runcandle. The smile on the beastman's face vanished. In these situations, there are only 2 reasons why an individual's smile disappears after hearing the Runcandle name. Either they fear the Runcandles. Looks like among the prey I've killed so far in life, today's prey takes the win as the most pricey one. Come to think of it, your robes do have the black sword on it. My name is Quasito Truca, warrior of the Truca tribe. Or they loathe the Runcandles. And the White Wolf beastman's case is the latter. Back in the day, it was the Runcandle clan's first patriarch who killed Javier, a White Wolf beastman the tribe worshipped as a god. Today I will offer you to Javier at the altar to soothe his grudge and sorrows. Jean Runcandle. Make a choice. Will you have an honorable duel with me, or will you attempt to run away like a coward before being torn to thousands of pieces? Jean imbued aura into his sword. I shall have an honorable duel. Jean made that decision after taking the White Wolf Beastman's characteristics into account. Generally, they considered humans as mere prey or toys they could mess around with. They never showed honor or dignity, and cruelly killed their prey. However, there are specific situations in which they put their honor on the line to battle the enemy. It happens when they consider their enemy to be strong enough, or when they're a runcandle. In these cases, they attempt to have an honorable duel with their opponent. They will put aside all underhanded methods and face their adversary with respect. Since those who die through this duel don't experience unfairness or corruption, they can be offered to Javier at the altar. Quasito Truca, I would like to make a suggestion before the duel begins. Speak, little runcandle. During the duel, you cannot harm the unconscious human behind me. Quasito nodded in agreement. All right. But if I win, that lass is mine to kill as well. Understood. Jean moved to the empty area in front of the building. By doing that, he walked past Quasito. Nevertheless, the Beastman didn't attack the boy who had shown his back to him. It was due to the White Wolf tribe's laws about honor and duels. This seems like a good place. That way, you can keep your promise during the duel. Good idea. It seems you're knowledgeable about our laws. But keep this in mind, little runcandle. If you take advantage of our laws to double-cross me, you'll tear me to pieces, whether or not that corrupts me. I don't plan on doing that. Kohaha. It seems there are some honorable humans even among the runcandles. Jean smiled as he listened to the Beastman's words. This Quasito seemed to have met a runcandle for the first time ever. If he had encountered one of Jin's siblings instead of himself, there was no way he would have survived and talked for so long like this. Jean and Quasito faced each other with around 10 steps between them. Let's begin. Quasito lifted his hammer and took a stance. He planned on making the first move. Swoosh! Quasito darted forward as he wielded his hammer. He was unbelievably fast that no one would think his speed came from someone with over 200 kilograms of pure muscle mass. Jean avoided the blow by stepping backwards with skilled footwork and thrusted Bradamanti towards the Beastman's chest. However, a White Wolf Beastman wasn't about to get injured from Jin's swordsmanship. Quasito adeptly changed his attack patterns as he overwhelmed the boy. Jean could only helplessly get pushed around by the giant enemy. Clang! During these few seconds of exchange, their weapons only made contact once. But that single blow was enough to make Jean feel like his wrists were about to fall off. No, it wasn't just his wrists. His entire body was stinging and in pain, from his head to the tip of his toes. Jean judged that he could only parry 10 blows from this beast at most, before his body collapsed. I'll only get one chance. If he had no chances at winning at all, Jean would have immediately broken Orgel's pendant to summon Luna. And if his eldest sister were here, a weakling like Quasito wouldn't have lasted a single second against her. But this crisis wasn't life-threatening enough that he'd break the pendant. Moreover, if he couldn't overcome a simple crisis like this, he wouldn't have the right or qualification to become the world's most powerful magic swordsman in the future. All the powerful and mighty individuals Jean knew overcame deadly crises in their lives and became symbols of strength. In cases like this, having a weapon that the opponent wasn't aware of was always an advantage. There were two crucial things Quasito didn't know about Jean. The fact that he could use both spiritual power and magic. I can't use magic, though. Magic was out of the question. If he missed the opportunity and failed to kill Quasito, he would have to break the pendant to summon Luna. If Luna noticed the traces of magic and Quasito blabbed about it, Jin's life would take a turn for the worse. Furthermore, 4-star magic spells wouldn't be strong enough to pierce through the White Wolf Beastman's thick coat. In other words, he only had one choice. Spiritual power. And Jean had already made up his mind on how to use it to overpower his opponent. I'll awaken the sword. Awakening Bradamanti. the exclusive function that was only available to a contractor that controlled spiritual energy. The function Murakan told Jean not to dream of using until he reached 5-star in spiritual release. The day Jean received the sword from Luna, he actually attempted to awaken Bradamanti that evening. When he awakened the sword, Jean felt a surge of power overflowing within and coiling around him. However, Murakan intervened and pummeled him, so Jean couldn't complete the awakening. "Are you trying to kill yourself, Jean Runcandle? You're the unique contractor. If something happens to you..." That was the first time Jean saw Murakan get genuinely angry and furiously yell like that. In order to make up for that, Jean had to buy countless types of erotic magazines for the perverted dragon. And now, Jean was waiting for an opportunity to experience that surge of power again. Slam! Jean groaned loudly as he blocked a heavy blow from Quasito's hammer. Despite Bradamanti's perfect shielding, the boy's body was nearing its breaking point. "That's a good sword, little Runcandle. It doesn't have a single nick even after receiving my hammer's attacks. Thanks for the compliment. But it doesn't match well with your symbol, the black sword. It's too white and dazzling." Clang! Another blow came at him. This time, Jean was sent flying all the way to the Kinsalo building's wall. Slam! Feeling the hard stone wall in his back, Jean felt like his skull and spine would shatter. But he somehow managed to hold on to his consciousness and stay awake. Ha! Cough! Ha! As he panted while coughing up blood, Jean could see two Quasitos approaching him, his vision doubling due to the concussion. "It's over now. I'll offer that sword along with you to Javier. That was a good duel." Quasito raised his hammer up high. If that boulder-esque weapon fell on Jean, he would perish without a doubt. Farewell. The moment he was about to deal the finishing blow, Quasito felt his vision suddenly go dark. It was only for an instant, but for some reason, he felt like several hours had gone by. Quasito couldn't swing the hammer. Time had stopped momentarily for him. When he regained consciousness and looked down, his now clear eyes saw a black blade impaling his body. A black blade that seemed to have been dyed by the shadows within the darkness. And on the other end of the sword was Jean, whose hair was swaying in the air like a blazing fire being fueled by a warm wind. I didn't know why a black sword was the clan's emblem either until recently." Quasito coughed and red blood splattered on the ground. But suddenly, Jean let out a horrible shriek. Once he calmed down, he spoke in a voice that was completely different than usual. A coarse, rough and unsettling voice. "That was a good duel. Shuraya." The dead Quasito's shadow. Mesa's shadow in the distance. The shadows of the burning trees. They all flew towards Jean before getting absorbed by him. The shadows moved as if they were avoiding the light and taking cover inside the boy. Chapter 28. Class Advancement, Welcoming Ceremony, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Fortunately, Jean successfully awakened Bradamanti. Unfortunately, as all the shadows in the area were sucked into him, Jean felt the searing pain of his body tearing into thousands of pieces. His mouth was screaming on its own volition, and his limbs were subconsciously twisting around. Whether he opened or closed his eyes, he still saw the same muddled and dizzying darkness. Jean wondered whether this was going to be the end of him. It was a miracle he hadn't fainted yet. Jean realized this was the spiritual energy congestion Murakan had warned him about. When the boy first attempted to awaken Bradamanti and Murakan became infuriated, the dragon later sat down and calmly explained the dangers of the sword. When individuals with insufficient spiritual energy try to awaken the sword recklessly, they pay the price for it. If one experiences spiritual energy congestion, 9 in 10 people immediately perish. It wasn't as if Jean had forgotten about the energy congestion when awakening Bradamanti during the fight. He simply didn't have any other solution to win and survive, other than Orgel's pendant. But Jean didn't want to break it yet, as it could only be used once in his lifetime. The sudden mission issued to the beginner class cadets. The appearance of Kinsalo and a white wolf beastman. Jean believed that while Siren hadn't predicted Mesa's kidnapping, his father had planned for this unexpected incident to occur to examine Jin's handling of the situation. This mission wasn't to test the cadets. Its true objective was to evaluate Jean, and Jean only. If I had used the pendant to survive the life-threatening situation, Father would have given me the worst possible score. Jin's father, Siren Runcandle, was an extremely cold-hearted person. The patriarch was only showing interest in Jean because the boy was connected to Soderette and because of his prominent results and skills in class. However, if Jean disappointed his father a single time, Siren would ruthlessly abandon all hopes and interests in his youngest son immediately. In truth, Jean was hoping for that to happen. As long as Siren's interest in him persisted, the boy would have a harder time to act covertly and train his magic. Jean didn't really hold any attachments towards the clan and his reputation in the first place. However, today wasn't the right day to disappoint his father. Jean still had a lot to learn and receive from the Runcandle clan. Ark. Jean cried out in agony again as he bent his back on the wrong side. Each time a shadow got absorbed in his body, Jean thought that death wouldn't be a bad solution to escape this pain. If there truly were punishments waiting for sinners in hell, would it feel like this? The boy was experiencing the sensation of being burned alive as well as having his organs frozen at the same time. I can't lose consciousness. If I do, it's over for me. Stay focused. He had never experienced such pain even in his first life. The suffering wasn't as bad as this back when his teacher struck lightning at him for several hours to make him understand the essence behind lightning magic. Jean had no idea whether time was flowing or not. He wasn't sure whether a couple of minutes or several hours had passed since the agony began. He couldn't resist this forever. Jean had to do something in order to overcome this crisis. And the answer to this something was obvious. Spiritual release. The boy barely managed to sit cross-legged on the ground and began gathering the spiritual energy inside his body to one location. Dark red blood poured out between his trembling lips, and his eyes had completely rolled back, unable to return to their original positions. He constantly coughed and gasped for air. Jean could feel that he was walking on a thin line between life and death right now. However, he couldn't control the violent and chaotic spiritual energy inside him merely with 3-star spiritual release, a stage he had just recently reached. Having started the spiritual release, Jean spat out a clot of dark blood and fell forward. Again. Keep your cool. A strong dizziness took over him as he began to hear auditory hallucinations. BDNVL.M. Most of the hallucinations were related to the events in Jin's past life. Stuff like, "You're the disgrace of the clan," or, "A failure like you shouldn't have been born in our clan." Those kinds of auditory hallucinations kept constantly bothering him. However, such words and slander had no effect on the current Jean. He completely ignored what his ears were telling him, and concentrated on the spiritual energy inside him. Hot energy on one side, cold energy on the other. Jean instinctively separated the spiritual energy inside his body to the right and left according to their properties, as if he were sorting out pebbles on the ground according to their colors. The violent pain rooted in his brain slowly started to dissipate. His eyes rolled back to their normal positions and light returned to his vision. Jin's intuition was telling him that he was about to successfully gain control over the spiritual energy congestion inside him. As the agony diminished, Jean slowly inspected his surroundings. The shadows Jean had absorbed had returned to their original positions. However, unlike what Murakan had shown him in the Storm Castle's underground chamber, the objects that had their shadows stolen from them didn't get damaged or broken. The more the pain disappeared, the better Jean could think with a clear mind. Soon enough, Jean fully separated the two types of spiritual energy remaining inside him. His surroundings regained their original colors. The blaze died down under the influence of the spiritual energy, and the burnt forest smelled of ashes. Phew! As he exhaled deeply, the disciplined spiritual energy came to a standstill. The energy no longer harmed Jean in any way. Did it work? The pain disappeared unnaturally quickly. That it's making me nervous now. Jean stood up and started stretching his body. He felt nothing out of place. In fact, everything was as usual. However, the one difference compared to before was the abundant spiritual energy inside him. It felt like it was about to leak even if Jean stood still, doing nothing. In any case, I don't think I'll have any problems moving around now. I should quickly head back with Mesa. Mesa was still unconscious in front of the Kinselo building. In other words, not much time had passed since the beginning of his battle against Quasito. As he passed Mesa's arms over his shoulders, Jean suddenly turned around to face the building again. Who's there? He had detected someone. Someone was walking down the corridor inside the building towards the front door. However, unlike the Kinselo members he had fought against earlier, this person didn't feel like a trained fighter. The unknown individual was walking carelessly as Jean heard their ragged breath. Please save me. As Jean ripped the door open, he saw a terrified young man raise both his hands in defense. He looked delicate and weak, as if he hadn't faced any hardships in life. Jean couldn't help but tilt his head in confusion. Who are you? Another Kinselo member? No. Absolutely not. I am Sember Bill, from the Bill clan of the Zhan Kingdom, so it's you. I almost missed you. Nice to meet you. Jean grinned as he spoke. Sember Bill. He was the heir of the Bill merchant clan of the Zhan Kingdom. He was the missing individual the cadets were searching for. Why that you are? Jean Runcandle. I was looking for you after receiving a request from your father. Runcandle. Thank the heavens. As soon as Sember heard Jin's name, his eyes began to glisten in tears. You have saved my life. I, Sember Bill, will never forget this favor, Lord Jean. Thank you very much. As he received the heartfelt gratitude, Jean could only stand awkwardly and feel guilty. Ever since the Kinselo members had attacked the cadets, he had completely forgotten about Sember's existence and their mission to search for him. There's no favor to repay. We received this mission after being remunerated. Now, stop crying. It's time to go home. Sob, sob. Sniff. Yes. And so, Jean and Sember left the ashen forest as the former carried Mesa on his back. Sember only recovered his senses a while after they had left the forest. Come to think of it, how did you get captured by them, Sember? We only heard that you had disappeared in this area. That's, if it's difficult to talk about, you don't have to. Not at all. In truth, it was because of my lover. But I'm not sure whether Lord Jean will believe me. Why wouldn't I believe you? Did you elope with her or something? No. I came to the southern border because I was following my lover, who passed away 2 years ago. Jean stopped nodding along and froze in his footsteps. You followed your deceased lover here. What do you mean? Had he lost his mind from the shock of being kidnapped? Jean thought to himself as he observed Sember's gaze. However, his eyes seemed clear and alive. I'm also wondering whether I saw a ghost or not. But it was definitely her. She had the exact same face, and also had the 2 moles on her wrist. She gave me a note that told me to come here. And you know what happened afterwards? Sember awkwardly turned to Jean. Haha. As I thought, you don't believe me. I'm also not sure whether I should tell my clansmen about this or not once I'm home. No, keep talking. The woman who gave you the note. Was it really your lover? That's what I've been saying. There's no way I wouldn't recognize her. Her face, voice, her gaze as she looked at me. Everything was exactly the same as before. At those words, Jean thought of a single name. Bouvard Gaston. This seems to be that transformation master's handiwork. The transformation crimes. A series of uncommon crimes that shook the world in his past life. When the Vermont Empire's special forces revealed Bouvard Gaston's crimes to the public after capturing him, a majority of them were kidnapping cases. And there was only one reason why he would kidnap a rich tycoon's son. He was planning on demanding a ransom. What is the relation between Bouvard and Kinzelo? Jean couldn't find the answer to that right now. The boy decided that it was about time he went to find Bouvard himself. Ever since the Zipful followers tried to kidnap Jean when he left the Storm Castle, he and Bouvard were fated to meet one day. However, Jean hadn't gone to find the criminal until now, as he was still growing and had no opportunities. The fragmented workshop he manages is located in the Curano Dukedom's capital. I should find an opportunity to go see him while I'm in the intermediate training class. Jean felt a sense of incongruity whenever he thought of Bouvard. If the criminal was truly connected to Kinzelo and the radical Zipful followers, Jean couldn't recklessly stir trouble with Bouvard, as the backlash would be immense. I need to meet him face to face and find out what kind of person he is. It would also be a good idea to obtain more information about him that wasn't written in the newspapers in my past life. Having finished recounting his story, Sember smiled bashfully. Thank you for taking me seriously, Lord Jean. In truth, I thought no one would believe me if I went back home, which was giving me a heavy heart. But seeing you listen earnestly is a breath of fresh air. That's a relief to know. After walking for another 2 hours, Jean took out a flare from his chest pocket and shot it in the sky. The main house must have sent some reinforcements by now. Let us wait for them to arrive here. Ha! Lord Jean, did you actually call for Runcandle Guardian Knights just to rescue me? Sember was moved by Jin's sincerity, and appeared as if he would willingly pay several golden crowns to Jean if the latter asked for it. Jean didn't have the heart to say that it was all for Mesa, so he only nodded awkwardly. Ignorance is bliss. I will never forget today, Lord Jean. If you ever need my help in some way, please don't hesitate to come to me. Sember Bill spoke as he extended his hand. Jean didn't think the Runcandles would ever need the help of a mere clan of merchants, but again, he didn't say that out loud. Jean replied positively as he shook Sember's hand. Chapter 29. Class Advancement, Welcoming Ceremony, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. As soon as the beginner class cadets finished reporting the results of their mission, chaos descended upon the Garden of Swords. As Garen announced the mission's flawless completion to Rosa, she wore a satisfied smile. The other Runcandles who were waiting at the main house couldn't hide their shock and disbelief. What? Jean fought against a white wolf warrior beastman and won. Impossible. Must have been some bandit wearing wolf fur or something. How could a brat who just became a 3-star knight kill a white wolf beastman? The fourth daughter Mu Runcandle and fifth daughter and Runcandle were chatting amongst themselves. They were respectively 10 and 9 years older than Jean and were both currently 7-star knights. A powerful white wolf warrior beastman would be a difficult opponent even for knights who recently reached the 7-star stage. It was to no surprise that Mu and couldn't believe Jin's achievement. Even if the youngest faced a beastman that was extremely weak compared to their tribe's average, a 3-star still can't defeat a white wolf beastman. Yeah. But are you telling me Mother seriously believed what the report said? The two disgruntled ladies shook their heads. Meanwhile, 2 young men were as white as a sheet. Needless to say, they were Daytona and Haytona. Ever since the beginning of their ill-fated relationship with Jean back at the Storm Castle, the twins couldn't see Jean as a little brother. To them, Jean was a monster. Do you think that? Jean actually killed the beast man? Haytona spoke as he grabbed his twin's shoulder. His hand was visibly shaking in fear. No matter how strong that monster is, a white wolf beast man is impossible for him. I thought so. A relieved smile grew on Daytona's face. But Daytona turned to his brother and stared at him in the eyes. But it's not important whether he actually killed a white wolf beast man or not, Daytona. What's more urgent is that we're done for if he advances to the intermediate class. Despair rooted itself in the Tana twins' eyes as they visibly lost their will to live. In truth, the twins were hoping deep down that Jean would fail his mission miserably. They were expecting for his advancement to be postponed due to his failure, and in the meantime, the twins would train harder than ever to grow stronger. And once Jean finally advanced to the intermediate class, they wouldn't have to quiver in fear of their little brother. However, it was all over for them. Not only did Jean successfully rescue the missing individual, he also defeated a white wolf beastman. In fact, Jean was considered a hero amongst the cadets in the beginner class. Fuck. Sure, he could have been stronger than us back at the Storm Castle since we were all so young, but really. Even now. We shouldn't have messed with him back when he first joined the beginner training class. Daytona sighed deeply as he recalled past events. Back when the Tana twins were in their second year of the beginner class, there was a period of time when they fervently bullied Jean. As they had started learning proper swordsmanship 2 years earlier than Jean, the twins were stronger than their brother for a short while. Those first few months were full of delight and exhilaration. They could use the spars as a pretext to beat up their brother, who used to boss the twins around back at the Storm Castle. It wouldn't be wrong to say that those months were the best days of their lives. However, their happiness didn't last long. A few months after Jean joined the training class, the twins got clobbered and thrashed by their little brother in front of the cadets almost every day. And now, that nightmare was about to start over again as their devil of a brother would soon join the intermediate training class. This is depressing, Daytona spoke as he recalled the same events as his twin. His voice was weak and feeble, as if his soul was escaping through his mouth. Wait, no. It might be all right. We might be able to win against him. Our hard work so far in the intermediate class won't go to waste. Daytona spoke with hope as he changed his mind. No. We can't win against him. Honestly, I can't believe that he defeated a white wolf beastman. But I'm sure that story has some level of truth behind it. Ah. The twins lowered their heads once again and sighed. They were fully aware that they were below Jean in the food chain. While the Tana brothers stood in dismay, mewed and then snorted and sneered. Right, I forgot we had these morons within the family. Sheesh. Are you actually terrified that the youngest is advancing to the intermediate class? Kaya. Hayek. The twins glared back at them with tomato-red faces, but that only lasted for 2 seconds. Since they were in the middle of the 3-star stage, they wouldn't dare anger their 7-star elder sisters. Daytona, you just went hike and squealed like a pig, right? Want me to break your arm and put you in the pig pen? That's not it. Oh. Aren't you missing something there? That's not it, elder sister, the sisters laughed as they watched the Tana twins. After a while, Mew and then grabbed one Tana each and kissed them on the forehead. Geez, we're just kidding. Our little brothers are just so cute, I know, right? They're so sweet that sometimes, I want to bite them and crush them into little pieces, you know. The brothers trembled as they watched their sisters express their excessive love, for them. Then, Mew suddenly smacked her lips and grinned. So. Our dear little brothers are scared of Jean. As if we'd fear the youngest, elder sister. Ha. There's no way that's, shush. You can be honest, you know. Keep in mind that I absolutely detest liars. We're scared of him. This time, and wore an evil grin as she nodded. Mew and N were a great sister duo that got along very well, just like the twins. Then do you want us to help you out? How? When there's a will, there's a way. And he's just about to get in the intermediate class, right? The Runcandle's intermediate training class. It was on a completely different scale compared to the beginner class. The weaker cadets were at the 3-star stage, while the stronger ones were around the 5-star stage. There were far more members compared to the beginner class. The intermediate class was no different to a wild savanna or jungle. A place where the law of the survival of the fittest applied. In this setting, 3-star knights are herbivores, 4-stars are strong herbivores, and 5-star knights are savage predators. It was a completely different environment and atmosphere compared to the current beginner class, where the cadets considered each other as comrades and helped each other out. As the spectrum of cadets was quite wide, from 3-star to 5-star, there were several cadets who had remained within the intermediate class for over 10 years. Mionnen were using these senior intermediate cadets as slaves and pushing them around. I'll tell our slaves in the intermediate class about you too. Use them to trample on the youngest. They may be untalented pieces of crap who couldn't even graduate from the intermediate class, but they're still 5-star knights. They should be somewhat useful. Do you understand? Oh, Ohu. The Tana twins' eyes glittered. Are you handing over your faction within the intermediate class to us, elder sisters? For real. As there were 13 siblings, there were obviously factions within the Runcandle clan. Even the Tana twins had somewhat created their own faction within the intermediate class. In fact, one could consider the current beginner class cadets to be part of Jin's faction. Hahaha, we're just lending them to you, you foolish boys. I don't like how the youngest is growing rapidly either. He makes me uncomfortable. If you use our slaves and fail to trample on Jin, then you two better prepare yourselves, my adorable brothers. The Tana twins squeezed their fists tightly and nodded. If they used their sister's 5-star cadets, then destroying Jin wasn't just a pipe dream. Is someone talking about me? Jin thought as he scratched his ear after finishing his report. T/N. In Korea, there's this superstition where people believe that if their ears are itchy, it means someone is talking about them behind their back. I hear you successfully completed your first mission. Congratulations, young master. Your nanny is so proud of you. Thanks, Gilly. Can you prepare the warm water? I want to take a bath. Everything's already been prepared. You're the best. Yes, and being at home was the best as well. Jin began humming to himself. As he had been camping outside for an entire week, he missed taking a warm bath with pleasing soap scents. Oi, kid. But before Jin could enter the bathroom, an angry Murakan stood in his way. Oh, my dearest Nabi Runcandle. I missed you so moo, did you lose your freaking mind? I don't see what you're talking about. Jin flinched and avoided making eye contact with Murakan. How many times did I tell you not to awaken the sword? You could die if things go wrong, alright. Are your ears the problem here or is it your head? Answer me. I'll get rid of one of those two for you. Ha! Why would the great black dragon talk of such grim stuff? There were some circumstances. So, those circumstances were more important than your own life. Where in the world are there circumstances that are more important than Soderet's one and only contractor, HUH? Lord Murakan, please calm down for now. The young master only just came back from, stay out of this, strawberry pie. This is a serious conversation between us two. Understood. Wait, Murakan. You see, I didn't do it intentionally. My cadet was kidnapped right in front of me, so how could I let them be? And I almost ended up becoming minced meat under the hands of the White Wolf Beastman. The pendant. Is Orgel's pendant around your neck just for decoration? You could have summoned your sister using that. That would have been a waste. You never know who I'll fight against in the future, so how could I use it now? A waste. Do you value that pendant more than your own life? Ah, my head hurts from talking with you. Ugh. Murakan held his head with his hands and fell. A flustered Gilly quickly ran and caught him. Are you okay, Lord Murakan? Hey, you alright? Don't faint for something like this. Whatever. Fuck, what's done is done. It's a waste of time for me to get angry now. It just overheats my head and makes me collapse. However, as Gilly supported him, Murakan grinned from ear to ear. It was such a satisfied smile that Jean wondered whether he was actually mad at him, or whether he was just acting to get some skinship with Gilly. PR/N, my man with the muzovasis. By the way, Murakan. How did you know I awakened the sword? Your spiritual energy suddenly spiked up to the 4-star middle stage, so how could I not know? You blasted kid. Do you think the promised contractor of 1,000 years can just jump up a rank after a simple week-long outing like that? I did feel stronger than before after experiencing the spiritual energy congestion, but I didn't know it was by a whole rank. Jean could only scream in delight on the inside. In truth, he was secretly concerned as his spiritual energy had suddenly increased, but seeing Murakan's reaction, it seemed there were no side effects to worry about. Be thankful to Soderette for being interested in you. I've seen 10 people experience spiritual energy congestion in my lifetime, and 9 out of 10 died from it. No, I guess it's 9 out of 11 now. Who's the other person who survived? The first patriarch. No, it was me. Timar would have died from it too. Pfft. Murakan and Jean chuckled simultaneously. Anyways, I dare you to attempt to awaken the sword again. Aren't you happy that you've jumped to 4-star in mere instants? Well, that's the reward for putting your life on the line. So I dare you to try awakening the sword again before reaching 5-star. Because you'll definitely die this time around. I don't want to go through that painful experience a second time either. Anyways, are you finished scolding me? I'm gonna take a bath now. Jean darted away and ran to the bathroom. Strawberry pie, don't give him dinner today. We need to starve him for at least 2 days in order to set his mind straight. Understand? Murakan spoke as he saw Jean scurrying away. That's. I apologize, Lord Murakan. I cannot ignore my duties of serving the young master. Geez, I'm so jealous of him. It's driving me crazy. That kid was born with such good fortune that he's overflowing with luck now.